What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the fighting game tutorial series, we are going to be going over ending and destroying sessions. This is very important for cleaning up sessions properly when we're done with them. This could be when we finish a match and just end it. It could be if for any reason the players disconnect and we want to make sure that that session is no longer valid or available. There's a lot of reasons we may want to end or destroy a session. So this is proper cleanup, and it will allow us to host another game after we've already hosted one. So this is super important because before, when we hosted, we would have to close the game entirely if we want to host a new session. Now we can host our session in the first window, join in the second window. We will successfully join, as you'll see on the screen here with the text. Then I can go back to my first game and attempt to host again. When I attempt to host this time, what's going to happen is it's going to say it failed. And since it failed because we already had a session open, it's going to end that session and destroy it. Once that is complete, the logs will print that you see on the screen in the top left. This verifies that everything was ended and destroyed as expected. And since those things were ended and destroyed, we can now create a new session. So you see the second character is kicked back to the main menu, and now our server, or our screen on the left here, will be able to be hosting a match again. If I go back in here and I select host, I get the session has been created message that I would expect. I can't technically join with the second player yet. If I try and do that, I will get a failure. That's because even though we have canceled the session, technically the client wasn't kicked out of the session. This is something we will be covering in another episode. But for now, being able to clean up and destroy sessions is very important. You can do this as many times as you'd like, and it's worth noting that this is the proper way to handle ending sessions. It's also worth noting that while we've created and hosted the session, we technically haven't started the session yet. That's a different thing. Ending the session will stop that started session, so that's something we will need to cover. We're going to cover that along with our server travel episode. So for those of you that want to get caught up in the series before checking this episode out, I'll link you to the entire fighting game playlist. We're up to 240 episodes at the current time, with plenty more to come. If you're interested, you can check out this playlist in the top right corner, and that will show you all the episodes in the fighter. That way you can get caught up and implement things that you see on the screen right now. If you're just interested in the online mechanics, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to watch the rest of the series to implement them. But I do recommend that you watch at least the other online episodes because all the online episodes are kind of linked together. Like we have one on hosting, one on searching, and all these elements play together. That way we can have a true online session. This is a code and blueprint tutorial series, but we're going to be doing everything in the code today. Let's go to Visual Studio. And in Visual Studio, we want to go to the base game instance. So specifically, let's start in our base game instance.h. We need to make functions for ending and destroying sessions. Let's scroll down to our functions. And I'm going below my travel to session, and I'm making a new function for end session and end session completed. Let's start with these two. So first one is just void end session, and simply it ends an online session. Right now, we're just ending the session if we're trying to create a new one and there's one that's already valid. So we don't have to be able to call it from the blueprints or anything, but it's possible we will want a manual end session, such as if we are in a custom game between two players and the server or the host decides that they want to quit. Then we want to determine when the session was successfully ended or unsuccessfully ended. Really, we just need to know when the end session operation is completed. So void end session completed, and this is going to have two variables, an fname of session name and a boolean of ended session. This is important because these variables are related to the variables in the delegate that we're going to bind later. And so similarly to the join session completed function, we need to make sure we match the parameter list, and it requires an fname and a boolean. So void end sessions completed, fname session name, bool ended session. After those two functions, we also want to make a destroy session and a destroy session completed. So the first one, destroy an online session, is void destroy session. This is after the session is ended and we want to fully remove it or clean it up so that it doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't have to be directly after ending a session. You could have a timer. You could wait and make sure the session isn't started again. So for example, if you go back to the lobby and they want to change maps or something, you wouldn't have to destroy the session at that point after ending it, but for now, when the session ends, we're going to destroy it. Then we have void destroy session completed, which is the same thing where we need to match the delegate variables, and we're going to have fname, session name, and boolean destroyed session. So ended session for end session completed is determining if the ending session was successful, and the destroyed session in destroy session completed is determining if we were able to successfully destroy the session. These are the 4 functions we need for today's episode. Then we also need 4 more variables. So we're going to scroll down to our delegates and handles. We're adding these 4 today. So similarly to how we did the search for sessions and join sessions, we want to have an end session complete delegate and a destroy session complete delegate, as well as a handle for both of them. So first one here is f on end session complete delegate. And I'm just calling it end session completed delegate. Basically, once end session is called, we're going to make sure that this can be used to call the end session completed function once the operation is done. The handle is the one that's going to keep track of what's bound and what's not bound. So we will add the event or the binding, and we'll also clear it when we're done with it. Very similar to how we did the searching and the join sessions. There's more information on these in those episodes as I go in more depth with them. But for this we need fdelegate handle, and I'm calling this one end session completed handle. Then we have the same for destroy session completed, except this one is the proper type for destroys, such as f on destroy session complete delegate. And I'm calling this one destroy session completed delegate. Then I have another handle for that one, and it's just a regular fdelegate handle, but we're calling this destroy session completed handle. Now we have all of our handles, our delegates, and our functions set up. We can go to the base game instance.cpp. In here, we want to go down to our constructor, and we want to make sure we set up our delegates appropriately. Again, similarly to the search for sessions and join sessions completed, we're now going to set each of these new delegates. So the first one is end sessions completed delegate. We're going to set that equal to f on end session complete delegate, : create uObject. It's going to be of this type, which is uBaseGameInstance, and we're going to be calling uBaseGameInstance : end session completed. We're going to do the same for destroy. So destroy session completed delegate equals f on destroy session complete delegate, : create uObject. This because we want to use the base game instance as the object, and we're going to call uBaseGameInstance : destroy session completed. Good. In the constructor, we can scroll down to where we want to make these functions. So I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom below my travel to session function that we did in the last online episode, and I'm going to make end session. So void uBaseGameInstance : end session. Here it's going to start out like all of our other online functions, so we're going to check and make sure that we have the online subsystem. To check if you have this, you can use an if statement and check for iOnlineSubsystem pointer that I'm calling online subsystem. We're going to set that equal to iOnlineSubsystem : get. If this is valid, we'll go into the if statement. At this point we need to see if we can get the online session interface. So we do another if statement, iOnline session pointer, I'm calling mine online session interface, and we set it equal to online subsystem arrow get session interface. If this is valid, we can then go into this if statement, and now we know we can call functions on it. First thing I'm doing is adding logs like I've done for a lot of our online stuff, because we want to be able to test this. And before we have all the multiplayer components working, logs are a very simple way to test these things. So I've gone over these logs in more depth in prior episodes, but basically gengine has a function add on-screen debug message which works in standalone applications. So we can see this even when we're running standalone. I do have the UE log as well, so we can add it to the log if you want to check there, but gengine makes it easier to visualize. The first parameter is the ID or the index. I've just been incrementing by 1 every time. This is important because if you have logs with the same index, they will be overridden by a new log with that same index. So my last one was index 5. So I made this one 6, so they're not overridden. I have it up here for 30 seconds, which isn't required. I just did that so that it was easy to test and for me to talk over. This is the color of the text, which I just have as cyan. This is the actual text that we want to have. I'm just saying ending session. So if we see this pop up, we know that we're in the end session function. And again, I've done that for the UE log as well. Now on top of that, the important part is that we want to have our end session completed handle. This is the handle, not the delegate itself. And we want to add the delegate to the handle, basically saying the handle will track what this delegate is doing. Online session interface arrow add on end session complete delegate underscore handle. and we're going to pass in our delegate, end session completed delegate. So now our handle is ready to perform operations based off the delegate. Since that's set up, we can now actually try to call end session. So online session interface, end session, and you need to pass in a name of the session you're ending. Really, we should determine the name automatically, but as I've been going through the series, I keep mentioning we're using this hard-coded name of my game session just to demonstrate how this point works, and then I will go over automating that. It's very simple. It'll be a very quick change, but it's easier to test this way just to make sure that our session with the name we're giving it is working. So end session, and pass in my game session, or whatever you were calling your session in all these other episodes. Now this returns a boolean, and we could capture it and determine if it succeeded or not. We are going to do that. I'm not going to do it in this episode because our logs will get the point across, but we will need to do this for things that we do later in the series, so don't worry. At this point, since we've set up the handle and the delegate and the constructor, when end session is finished, this end sessions completed function will be called. We need to make the end sessions completed function now. Making it right under there, calling it void uBaseGameInstance : end sessions completed, and then make sure you have your two variables that we set up in the header file, which is the session name and the ended session boolean. Starting off this function, I'm going to do the same two if statements as before to make sure we can get the online subsystem and the online session interface. Once we can get those, I'm going to use my online session interface to clear the on-end session complete delegate handle, passing in the handle. The reason we clear this handle is because at this point, we've used the handle to successfully call end session completed, and we don't want to keep doing this process or anything like that. We just want to use it the one time. We have to set it up the next time we want to use it, and we're already technically doing that. Every time end session is called, this handle is going to be bound, so no additional work is required, but we want to make sure we clear it at this point as we are in end session completed now. At this point, I'm just automatically destroying the session. So I call destroy session. I don't have logs in here because if the session is being destroyed, we'll get logs for that. And the only place that we call destroy session from is this function. Destroy session logs will know that this function was called. So call destroy session, and then let's go and make destroy session. Void uBaseGameInstance : destroy session. Same two if statements as before. And these if statements are going to get the subsystem and the session interface. At this point, I'm going to use two more logs. I have another gengine add-on screen debug message. You see I'm using index 7 or ID 7 instead of 6. 30 seconds, cyan, and the text says destroying session. Same with the UE log. Now at this point, we're destroying the session, so we want to set our destroy session handle to set it equal to online session interface, add on destroy session complete delegate underscore handle, and we're going to pass in our delegate. After the handle is set up, we can try and call destroy session, so online session interface, destroy session, and we're going to pass it the direct name again, which is my game session. Note that destroy session returns a boolean if it succeeds or not, so you could check for it here. Again, we will do that in a later episode. It's not required now, but it will be very useful to us later. Since destroy session was called and the handle is set up, once the session is destroyed or once it fails to destroy, we will call destroy sessions completed. So we need to make this function, void uBaseGameInstance : destroy session completed, and fname session name bool destroyed session. Your first two sections here are the online subsystem and the online session interface. So get those. If we successfully go into here, we want to make sure we clear our on destroy session complete delegate handle, passing in the handle to make sure we can clear it and reset that one. At this point, I'm just adding another gengine and log to determine that the session was destroyed. You see I'm using index 8 here, 30 seconds, cyan, text says session destroyed. For both of them. If you want, you can make this a little bit better even by making sure that the destroyed session boolean was true instead of just saying session destroyed. It's not required you do this because the way we test this actually confirms it, but you could go ahead and add this here, session destroyed : %d, for example, for decimal, add a comma after the text parenthesis, and we'll pass in destroyed session. So basically display the boolean as an integer value. If it's 0, it's false. If it's 1, it's true. The only other thing we want to do at this point is determine when to call end session. I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to do that if hosting the session or creating the session fails. So I'm going to go to my host session function. And we had this section where we were printing a session has failed to be created, and this was if create session failed, and it will fail if there's already a session with that name. So at this point, I call end session. So end the online session if this one fails to be created. I'm very, very excited to get into more online behavior. Note that everything I've shown you to this point is essentially just using the online subsystem. These are pretty much the generic ways to go about everything. You can't go too wrong here. But in the next multiplayer episodes is where everything is going to start to be specific to our project. So if you have all this down, great. We can really start getting into how our project has to connect to another instance of our project. Replicating variables, RPCs, and then after that, rollback. So anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this episode and you're excited to make your project multiplayer, then please subscribe. It does more for myself in the series than anything else you can do. I really appreciate that. I also want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership, Discord subscribers, and Patreon members. You guys are awesome, and you've really supported the channel a ton over the years, so thank you guys so much. I'm incredibly grateful for you. If you ran into any issues while following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description, and that is completely free. Anyway, guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.